yeah, and we are recording, by the way. It's now time to begin. For those on Zoom, I'd like to mention that you can access closed captioning for the hearing impaired. We also want to let you know that this afternoon's event will be recorded. So if you would like to remain anonymous on Zoom, we give you a chance to shut off your video cameras and change your name if you need to. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Elephant Artists Relief Society, also known as EAR, and the EAR leadership team. I'd like to officially welcome you all to today's Umbrella Talk. My name is Kaylee Hall, an EAR board member and head of EAR's programming committee. For today's Umbrella Talk, we welcome Daniel Perryman, Lori Fuhrer, and Priscilla Bukasa to speak about the world of words, professional practices for poets and writers. But first, I'd like to begin today's event in the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth by honoring and acknowledging Mohkinstsis and the traditional Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, including the Siksika, Kainai, Pikanai, as well as the Ayaksi, Nakota, and Tsuut'ina nations. EAR acknowledges that this territory is also cherished by the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3, within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. We celebrate all nations, Indigenous and non, who honor this land. We are grateful to engage in an honest and eager process of reconciliation, and we are all treaty people. Today's event is part of EAR's ongoing series of Umbrella Talks, which offer presentations for artists of all disciplines. This year, EAR's Umbrella Talks are supported by the Rosa Foundation. But first, a little bit about EAR. Elephant Artists Relief Society is a registered charity that provides practical resources to artists of all disciplines in Calgary and surrounding areas to help sustain their well-being and livelihood. This year, EAR celebrates 17 years of service to the arts community. EAR provides emergency financial relief funding to artists who are experiencing a medical or financial crisis, professional development workshops such as this one, a twice-monthly online artist meetup group on Facebook called Studio E, a wide variety of community resource information on Facebook and our website, and access to group health insurance benefits. As a charitable organization, we rely on grants, but also largely on donors, memberships, and fundraising to do much of what we do. You can help us by raising awareness about EAR, and if you can, consider becoming a member or donating online. 100% of every donation is allocated to providing emergency relief for artists in times of need. Another way you can support EAR is by purchasing a yearly membership, which support our administration and programming, like the event you're watching or attending right now. So a few last bits of housekeeping. Throughout the presentation, we ask that for those of you online, keep your mics off, on mute, and for those of you here, enjoy the beautiful atmosphere and a glass of wine. Throughout the presentation, you're free to use the washroom, which is just around the corner, and we will have a brief Q&A session after the talk. There will be a short 5-minute break where we can get to know each other quickly, say hello, and then take questions from the audience online and in person. During the Q&A portion, we'll address as many of your questions as we can until we end at 4 p.m. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our writers. And we'll start out just by having each of them give their own introduction about what they do, their practice, and who they are. So, Daniel, would you like to start?
Mic check, 1, 2, absolutely. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, be it in person or online. It means a lot to us. And yeah, I guess I'll just jump in. I wrote some notes. So I'm a British Canadian artist based in Southern Alberta. I played sports before I found theater and storytelling, fun fact. And yeah, I graduated, I'm an actor by trade. So I graduated from the University of Lethbridge with a BFA in Dramatic Arts Performance, and I haven't looked back since. And yeah, I've been fortunate enough to perform professionally in Lethbridge and Calgary, and I've also been fortunate enough to produce 2 independent projects with the support of Tell a Story Hive. If you haven't heard of Tell a Story Hive, you should check them out. It's a great resource, which we can talk about later more. And then just last year, I also went on my first Fringe tour, which I can also talk more about. It's like a performing theater, I think, typically. And of course, I'm super excited and honored to be finishing a 2-month-long residency here at the Residence Inn by Marriott. And I'm so happy that y'all could make it here today and do this. So I would love to get to know the other writers.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for coming and thank you for inviting me to be part of this event. My name is Priscilla Bacasa. I'm a spoken word artist, a teaching artist, and an arts and cultural facilitator at Arts Common. I've been writing and performing poetry for over 14 years. Originally, I'm from Congo, born in Congo, DRC. I lived there, well, I was born there, then moved to Johannesburg, South Africa, lived there for a few years, and then I've called Calgary my home for the last 25 years. And it's been a pleasure living here. My first experience with writing, started when I was in grade 8 and I had no idea what spoken word was, and I had to write a haiku and didn't know how to do that. So I was like, let me just write a free verse poem and present that. And that was like my first experience with that. And I just kept writing. And then now I've been here with the support of community in Calgary. I've been able to perform here and sometimes in Edmonton as well. So that's just a brief introduction of me. I'm super excited to be, here and sharing my work with you guys. Thank you.
Oh, great. Can you hear me? Yeah. Awesome. I'm so glad to be here and to meet you. Oops. That water on the floor. It's hard to talk with my hands. My name is Lorianne Pure, and I'm a poet. I consider myself to be multimodal because I like spoken word. I like writing lyric narrative poetry, which sort of is a descendant, comes from the modernist movement. I like experimentation, surrealism, lots of fun stuff. So for me, it's really fun to keep changing it up and to share poetry in different genres. I've been a teacher or an instructor with the Alexander Writers Center Society for about 8 years, I think. And I've sort of taken this year off from that. But that's a wonderful place in Calgary and in the Z space, the Alexander Writers Center, where writers can go and get instruction. What else did I want to tell you? I also do Poet in the Class with Poetry in Voice, which is a wonderful national organization that provides support to schools so that poets can come in and talk to kids and work with kids on poetry. So I'm so excited. They told me they have their funding back again, so it's going to happen again this fall. It's been a pleasure to be involved with the different groups like that. And I'm also the admin of a couple of groups on Facebook that I welcome you to join. And there's Calgary Poetry Events, where people can post their events that are coming up for poetry, whether they're involved in them or they're organizers. EAR has also been posting about events like this there. And also the Calgary Poets Group, which I'm hoping will have some more uptake. It's a place where you can share your poems with each other and opportunities for poets as well. All right, I think that's what I want you to know. And thank you so much.
Wonderful, thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for giving us an intro. I'm going to start with kind kind of brass tacks, I hope that we have some writers in the audience, or at least hobbyists of writing and poetry. But I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about your process and what inspires you and where you go to write, how you deal with the daily practice of writing in your life.
I'll go first. Why not? Yeah, okay. Hands up. Who in here is a writer? Okay, yeah. And poets? Yes, bit of both. Awesome, cool. I'm sure online there's some too. Yes. So to answer your question, I'm just going to dive in. So like things that interest me and my process or inform my process, or collaboration is a really big one. And I also really love leaning into limitations and constraints. And I think that kind of came from my theater background, but constraints and limitations are everywhere in the arts world. So, and I'm also really interested in what it means to engage an audience in the development process of a project. So like giving audiences and the public a perspective or insight that they might not typically be privy to. I'm really interested in that. And yeah, what is my process like? It's sporadic, very, very sporadic. And I feel like over the past couple of years, I've had to really kind of diversify my skill set and what I do. And so with that comes this idea of like shifting gears a lot. And yeah, but generally speaking, I like to have like a studio space or a spare room somewhere separate from like your day-to-day, like chilling out, making food. And I like to have like a dedicated space if I can. Sometimes easier said than done, but yeah. How about that?
That was so pro. Gosh, I found that teaching has had a huge impact on my process. And for several years, I did a poetry cafe every Sunday. It used to be in person at the Writers Center, and then it moved on to Zoom and stayed there after the pandemic. And I love writing with a group and using different prompts. Prompts can lead us in directions that we wouldn't have maybe naturally gone with our minds. And there's something about knowing that like, other writers are gonna might hear from you as you share that work at the end of the session, if you choose to, that sparks my creativity. And in some ways, I'm like, oh, I can't wait till I could show like Alex that I've written or something like that. So those regular sessions with other poets are really fun. I like trying collaborative things with poets in a group setting or on using different features of Zoom. You can write what's called an exquisite corpse poem that came from the French surrealist writers that were, line by line. Poets write poems together. That's the most basic type, but there's a lot of different collaborations that you can try too. So those are part of my practice. I'm using my phone more and more. I used to write in a notebook all the time, and I still carry around a notebook, but I'm more often like putting it into Evernote. It's a great app. It goes onto your computer as well, and they sync with each other. And then you can copy and paste that into your Word file and get your poetry onto your computer more easily when you're on the go. So it's got a little more facility than retyping things you've written in your notebook. So I think I'm going a more technological direction, and lots of things with voice memo to capture those ideas, especially like musical ideas. I write songs as well, and with spoken word poetry, when something kind of sounds good and you don't want to lose that, you save it into there. So I have all of these files in there, and whenever I want, I can look at one of them and write the poem that goes with that kernel of an idea. So those are some of the things that are part of my practice. And I think having a positive habit, like trying to not force yourself to write, but trying to make it normal for yourself to write at certain days and certain times, you kind of, we're such creatures of habit, you kind of train your mind to be able to get into that creative space on those days, on those times going forward.
I'll start with what inspires me. I think first it's I like to write about what's going on in the world. I think we as poets are historians, we're storytellers, we're keepers of the truth. And so I write what's around me. I write about my faith. I write about love. Just things that are near and dear to my heart. But of course, as a professional, you're going to get invited and you're going to have to write about subjects that you are not familiar with, and you'll have to do research. And even in my own personal writing, I feel like I'm always kind of doing research. But that's what inspires me to write. But I will touch on what Lori said. I feel like now I've been teaching now for like the last 3 to 4 years, and that has really opened up my eye on my process, because when you teach, now you have to know how to do it. Because I'm a self-taught poet. I didn't learn it, I didn't go to school for it. And so this was everything that I learned on my own and watching YouTube, and I digested a lot of spoken word poetry. And so from that, I developed my own process that I never had to think about until I had to now teach. How do you do it? So that's where I think it formed my process, where and it's different. Like Daniel said, it's sporadic at times, but I think there's like a foundation to it that I've developed, where I'm just maybe I used to write a lot on my note in my journals as well. That was like the one I went to. But then after a while, you need to have it somewhere else, and so I'd have it on the computer. And so I have notebooks everywhere. Notebooks everywhere. The notes on my phone, and sometimes it's just jotting down notes and one thing or something like that. I've learned not to ignore creativity when it comes, or when words come, because once you do, you're like, oh, okay, I'll get to it. It's gonna disappear. I've done it so many times at night where I'm feeling words come at me, and I'm like, I'm so tired, and I sleep, and I'm like, I'm gonna write in the morning. I wake up, nothing. I can't remember a single word. So I don't care if it's 2 a.m. in the morning. If I feel something, I'm waking up, pulling out my notes, and I'm writing down. If it's just 1 line, 2 lines, it doesn't matter. I don't know where it's from. I will just write it and have it somewhere. And then I'll come back to it. It's not like pressing, and I don't put a lot of pressure on myself to have some sort of finished product. So I think it's just like always being able to jot down notes, jot down thoughts and stuff like that. But when I'm really getting into the process of writing, I think it's you need to have space and create time for it, constantly creating space for it. So for me, if I have a subject matter, I'm just gonna jot down a bunch of words everywhere, or even thoughts or lines, and I have like a book or on my computer, just writing down lines. And I don't have a full idea of what it is I'm writing yet, but I have notes down and I leave it. Because if I pressure it, I'm gonna create something that's not good, and I hear it and I'm like, that doesn't even sound good. That sounds so horrible. But I just leave it there for a bit, and I come back again when I'm ready again, and I'm looking like, oh, I can make this line work, and then I erase everything else, and that's how kind of I start with that. So that has been my process. But if it's something I don't know, I do a lot of research. I've written poems that are personal to me, like about Congo, and I was born there. And I didn't know much about it. So I will do research. I will do a bunch of research on things, write down notes, information, just filling out the gaps, and then I'll just put the bones of it. I just need a frame of it before I start. That's the process of like writing. It's just having frames or writing prompts, just different things like that. But I found that lately, because I'm writing for like different events and not personally for myself, which hurts my heart to be just writing because I have an event, I have this show, or somebody has commissioned me to do it. And it's just been hard to just get into it like I used to, just free writing for myself. That's like, I think the best, when you're just writing for yourself and not having to do it because you have an audience coming up. So with that, like if I'm just doing it for myself, I will just write down notes and stuff. I feel like the hardest part is getting started. or even that first line. But once I have it, it's like now you're in momentum and you're just writing and writing and writing. But for even an event, I just feel like sometimes it's so forced and I have to force myself. You have to force yourself to write, even if it's nothing and it's something that doesn't make sense. You just put it on paper, write something, get your pen moving. That is the process. Get your pen moving. I will write about my day, just write something so mundane, and then that will ignite some creativity. Yeah, I think I'll leave it in there. I feel like you want to add something to it.
Go ahead and add.
Well, I was thinking then the revision process comes in, but
Yes.
having some distance from the work, as you
Yeah.
said, is so essential too.
Yeah, having some distance, yeah.
Well, what I found sometimes is that a lot of us have superstitions around our writing that may or may not be valid. So I used to think that I couldn't, and like if I had to write on the spot for a course or whatever, maybe I wouldn't be able to do it because maybe it has to come very naturally. But sometimes, like seeing it outside the process later, when I've got two poems and one just came to me, and the other one was because of a prompt or because of an event where I had to produce a certain piece of work. Sometimes the quality is about the same. Because in the revision process, we come in, they talk about, you know, the hand of the inspiration or the writing being separate from the hand of the editor. But I feel like there's creativity in the editing. And every time I do like a significant edit of a piece and I feel like I've made it quite a bit better, you get that new poem feeling. And I think a lot of us have some anxiety around revision. We worry that we could go too far and like wreck the piece. But the great thing about having it on your computer is that you can keep all those drafts and you can go back if you want to. You have that safety net.
Yeah, I have to agree with the revision. I've never been the type to, because I'm like, once it's done, it's done. I don't touch it anymore, you know? But I realized you have to go back. You have to go back and there's one poem I've had it for like years and I keep adding and changing it. And I've just learned to be okay with the changes. Learned that, you know, sometimes, because it will sit there and I'm like, I'm just not happy with that line. I'm just not, you know, there's something off. So sometimes it'll sit for years and then I come back and be like, I have to fix this now. It's not ready to be fixed, you know. So I think it's important to not feel like you have to leave it as that and revise the work as much as you need to until you feel like, hey, this is how I want it to look. Yeah.
And I feel like the more that we learn about craft too, the more like confidently we can revise, where we really feel like we know that this line should be more interesting because I've done more poetic devices in it. But then the sum of those parts also has to feel good and have that tone and mood that you want in your poem.
No, thank you so much for thoughts on this. I'm wondering just at what point in your lives you felt this is the right path for you, and at what point did you decide that this is more than just a hobby? This is something that I really want to dedicate my time to.
I'll go first. I'll start with saying this. Having immigrant and African parents, you cannot just choose the arts as your first option. We didn't come to this country so you could, you know, play around. So I had to go to school. I had to get my degree when I finished. So because I started writing and performing after high school. But so it was always at the back burner. I was just doing it at events at Mount Royal and at UFC, and it was just always on the side thing and not like professionally. And I was okay with it. I had no problems doing that. But I just felt this urge to just keep doing it and doing it. And there's always so many times where I'm like, eventually I'm gonna have to give this up because this is not gonna work. Like, how can I do this full time? I'm not gonna survive being a poet, spoken word artist. I won't survive. I can't do it. So I got my degree in marketing, and I would still be performing. But at the later part, I would say there's times where I'm like, I need to take this more seriously. Only from like people coming to me and be like, your words impacted me. What you just shared with me just touched me. I'm like, oh man, am I doing a disservice to myself and to my writing to just give it up in that way? And then I'd be during university, I'd skip school because I had a performance, and it started paying, and so I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm a student. I need to do this, and I finally like made that decision. I'm like, I need to take this seriously and really see how it's going to be if I commit to this fully. I mean, this was maybe after like years of doing this. I have already graduated, so it's like 2019. I'm like thinking, let me see if I put my all into it and what will happen. And then COVID happened. So there was no, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna be in the writing process. No, during COVID, like your mind is everywhere. You don't know what's happening, and you think you're gonna be in this place of solitude to write, but it's hard. You're going through a lot of emotions. And so it was like, how can I do this full time now? But I got introduced to community, a lot of not that I didn't have community, and I've had the privilege and just the honor of having so many good people around me that have opened up space for me, opened up opportunities for me. But it was so hard for me to call myself an artist to begin with as well, because I just thought, well, no, I'm just a poet. I just write. That's not art, that's just a writer. And it was a battle within me to finally be like, I am an artist. This is important what I do, and I shouldn't belittle or feel imposter syndrome or anything like that. So once I first established that identity, and so I really put myself out in artist communities and got involved with like CADA, part of the cultural instigator, where we support different um, emerging artists and different things like that. And I got involved with Arts Common and things like that. And so this is after COVID too, that really exposed me to community. And so from then I'm like, I'm gonna take this seriously. I'm a full-time artist now, doing it. But it just took me a long time. Thank you. Yeah, it took me a long time to get to this place where I'm like, I love marketing and I still do it as a freelancer, but I had to choose this path to see it through and see where that would go for me. And it's just been an amazing journey to connect with new people, connect with you, Kaylee, and connect with everyone here. So these things like this event is important to me because I get to meet new people and continue that journey of being an artist and sharing my work. Did I answer your question? I feel like I'm going on.
You have answered it very well.
Okay. Like, am I?
And I think that Daniel might be in agreement with certain things you said, because I see you kind of nodding your head
go
as
ahead.
well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting because I just want to sit back and listen. It's so good. But if I were to dive in and answer your question, where did it all begin for me? And is it the right path? Yeah, like my family and I immigrated to Canada when I was 14, and then from Britain, England, and my parents insisted. I just felt what you were saying about like the immigrant parents, and it's such a blessing to be here, like in this country, and I think about that a lot, and so. And then my parents were like, "You got to go to university." Yeah. and me being the stubborn person I am, I was like, "Well, I'm gonna do drama." And so. And I did it, and I saw it through, and I wouldn't look back. And I really do. Back to my intro, I owe a lot to my high school drama teacher. She showed me, similarities between sports and theater, and how it's just like you're still part of a team, but it's just not necessarily against an opposing team. It's just against yourselves, and that really. Stuck with me. My competitive side was like, I'm gonna tell this story the best way I can, and this is really interesting conversations because my residency here has been for playwriting and writing, and not necessarily poetry, but poetry has always been kind of a hobby for me. It's not something that I really pursued professionally per se, but yeah, so I just having a lot of thoughts on the side about this, and also the similarities between what I'm hearing and just like, you know, acting and all that stuff. So that's kind of where my story started, I guess. I don't know if there's probably more thoughts, but.
And are you at the point where you consider yourself a professional now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, going to university was a big step, and I pick up odd jobs every now and then, as you do. But it is, like Priscilla said, the thing that keeps me coming back is that idea of, especially in acting, it's like you're always working with a new group of people, and I don't know, there's just something so special about that, and how people can leave their mark on you, and just like, yeah, I just think it's so special, and yeah, I don't know.
And Lorianne, let's hear about your transition from being a hobbyist writer of poets into a full-fledged artist.
Well, I lived in Ottawa for quite a few years. My dad was in the Air Force, and we were posted there. And fellow that was in my homeroom, who's kind of the freaky one nobody wanted to talk to, he decided that I was going to be his buddy. And I was awkward and shy, and I was like, okay. So anyways, he was a poet, and he'd been writing since like grade 5 or something. And he introduced me to the beat poets, and he put pen and paper in my hand, and he put on these old records, Cream and like psychedelic stuff, Donovan, and we would write, and then we would share with each other what we wrote. So that's probably why I like writing in groups of props so much. But he and I started taking the bus downtown and checking out some poetry readings that were going on. And we met a fellow named Rob McLennan over there that would be the one giving out the pamphlets to let you know when the next reading was and encouraging you to come back and stuff. So they kind of glommed onto us, like, oh, fresh blood, and welcomed us into their scene. And they were publishing books and putting on festivals. I got involved as a volunteer and started helping to organize things. And I just loved being involved and in a space with other poets. They would hang out with each other after the readings, and there was a real sense of community there. So I moved to Winnipeg for a while, Cold Lake, and moved to Calgary. This is my 20th year in Calgary, and I love the arts community here, and that keeps me going as well. That there are ways to be involved in poetry here. I found the Single Onion Poetry Society when I moved to town. I became involved with the People's Poetry Festival, and I ended up being its artistic director last year. We had a really good time at C-Space, and had lots of poets come out to check that out. We're taking a gap year because I want to put together a board and go for grants to pay the poets, so we can do things in our own way. So if anybody's interested in that, I'm especially looking for people that are BIPOC and queer that want to be part of it, because we're focused on diverse voices in particular for the festival. So
Thank you. And could you share what BIPOC means for the audience if they don't know?
oh yes, Black, Indigenous people of color.
Great, thank you. And how about the transition from writing in solitude by yourself to performance, and what are the differences? How do you cope with performing versus writing as an independent?
For me as a spoken word artist, I truly appreciate poets, page poets, because that's a different skill that you also need to have. For me, when I'm writing, and anytime I'm writing, even in solitude, I always have it in mind that it's going to be spoken out loud. So when I write it in ways that it's like, I have to know how it sounds. So when I'm writing, and my favorite part of spoken word poetry is the writing part, because you're in it and you're loving it. You're loving your own lines. You're like, oh man, this is great. You don't know how the audience is going to take it, but that doesn't matter. You're writing because you love writing. That's the the first thing. You have to enjoy it. You have to love poetry. So that's my favorite part is the writing part. But when I'm writing, I'm always speaking it out loud to hear how it sounds. So I'll write a line and I'm saying it. And when I was younger, it was so much easier because my memory was so sharp. By the time I finish writing a poem, I already have it memorized because of how many times I've said it out loud. Yeah, so you have it, you're done, and it's already memorized because I've talked it out loud. Now it's a little bit harder because I'm writing a lot and I'm busy and I have to do the memorization part later. So that's the hard part. But the performance part is spoken word poetry is all about how it sounds. And that's what you're working with is how it sounds, how you're performing, how your body is, everything. So all you have as a poet when you get up on stage is your voice. So part of writing is also practicing performing it. So I will spend, if I have a show coming up, I will be saying that poetry 10 times a day. And if I mess up, I start the count again. And I'm re-saying it and re-saying it until I have it perfectly. I think so. I try not to beat myself up as I get older if I don't have a poem memorized. But it's hard for me because I still get nervous. 14 years later, I still get nervous when I perform. My hands are shaking. And so what I supplement is I memorize it because I don't want to go up there with something and then you'll see my hands shaking. That's the reason why I started memorizing things because I'm like, they're going to know that I'm nervous. So I have to make sure that I'm not holding anything. I can move my hands around and use my hand as gesture, and part of like the whole performance is how you even use your body in that performance. So the practicing that goes in that I involve in poetry is a lot, and I think people don't know how much you put it into the practice before I go up. Is I practice a lot. I hear how it sounds, and if like the revision part, if something I keep saying this line and I'm like, oh, that sounds terrible, like I have to fix it. Something doesn't sound right. So that's how when I write, I'm always listening. It's like a musical thing. It's a musical thing to hear how words are sounding together, how similes and metaphors are coming together, threading that whole poem together and making it. And so one thing I really appreciate about singer-songwriters, because they're poets too, I think. You hear it and it's like, oh man, that is poetry. That is poetry for sure. And so you have to hear how it sounds. It has to sound beautiful. And even when you also read poetry, like page poetry, some of that's page poetry, oh man. I love reading poetry. I think I'm a sports person too, like Daniel, and I thought my pathway was sports as well. But I see like the joy I get, the way I react to sport is the way I also react to poetry. I'll be watching poetry and I go crazy over lines, like, oh my gosh, they did not say that. Rewind and watch it. Like it gives me that same energy that I'm watching, like if I'm watching basketball and I see someone dunk. I have that same sort of energy for poetry, which is crazy. I go crazy for good lines and good, and, because it's all about how it sounds and how it makes people feel. And so when you're writing, especially, I don't know about other things, but when you're writing for spoken word, you really have to be aware of how it sounds and how, you're putting your words together. So yeah, that's my thought. Go ahead.
Gosh, I was very focused on what you were saying. I think I lost the question.
Oh, I'm interested in the transition of independent writing to performing it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm really interested to hear what Priscilla has been saying about memorizing and how many times a day you would memorize. I did find it quite difficult, and I was like, I can't do spoken word. I started doing it more and more to get it memorized to where, like, okay, it's memorized when I'm by myself in my bedroom, but is it still memorized when I have an audience of people looking at me, and my own, self-doubt, calling at me, going, oh, you're gonna forget these lines. And for some reason, when I have a guitar in my hand and I've played those songs over and over again with that rhythm, it sticks. So I realized that I need to practice reciting and reading my poetry with a rhythm. And I well that has something to do in my mind with the poem and the flow of the poem. So I've got one where like things take place down here and up here, and I kind of do this, and I don't know if people think I'm crazy for doing it, but it helps me remember what comes next too. Yeah, so you're almost like gesturing your poems very specifically, and hopefully it also looks like fun.
Body, using your bodies, it helps you memorize it. Like I'll be saying things and moving my hand like this, so I know where the next line is coming from. That I'm so happy you mentioned that, because that's like me too. Like I need to have body
Body language, yeah.
Yeah, I can jump on that. It's very interesting hearing this because as an actor, you know, like the one show that I did last year, the first act was pretty much like just me. It was like 20 pages. So when we talk about memorization, you know, and I think there's something to be said about how acting and like portraying a character that isn't necessarily myself. I like to think that you put a little bit of yourself to the character, you know. But for poetry, I think it's really interesting because it is just you, and like that's the thing that amazes me about singers and songwriters playing instruments and everything. I'm like, it's just them, and it's so vulnerable. I'm a very physical person, so memorization makes sense to me physically, remembering it and using your hands to help you through it. The way I typically memorize for like, if I'm acting, I actually write out, and I got this from my high school mentor, I actually write out every line, and I try, depending on how much time I have, I try and write out every line 7 times. Yeah, and I do it both with my right hand and my left hand, because I'm not left-handed. But I find that the focusing on writing the words themselves takes my mind off, you know, I don't know.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
I might try that.
Yeah, try it. And yeah, I think
That's wonderful. I love that tip. So I've heard the 7 times is a magic number for memorization.
Yeah, you can do it like 3 times or whatever, but and then, oh my gosh, and then I just forgot what happened. What was it? Oh, it's gone. It's gone. No.
Slam, we do this to try to help you remember somehow. It's supposed to help.
I don't write it as much as you do, but like I write the first draft on the computer, and then I write it on my notebook again to solidify. Like once it's like I'm perfect with it, I have this notebook where I write my finished poems where it's not going to be touched anymore, and I have this notebook that I'm just creating of the finished poems, because I don't trust, it's not that I don't trust computers, but you never know what might happen with your laptop and it breaks down and you lose all your words. Because I remember I used to write a lot on Facebook notes. They used to have Facebook notes, and I had tons of poems there, and then it disappeared, and I had to go through this whole thing. I had to search up through like Reddit to see how I can get these 10-year-old poems that I had in there, and I did. Like it was last year that I ended up finding all of them and putting it in my notes so that I can transfer it to my notebook. There's something so special about having it on paper, see it written with your writing, that feels so good about that.
I think that brings us to the point of seeing the gratification of your words on paper. Are any of you published? And if you could talk about any local publishing, that would be wonderful.
I remembered my thing. If I could
Oh,
go back, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But it had to do with from the question of writing solitary and collaboratively, and so that's something that I've been working on in my residency. I've been doing both, burning the candle at both ends. So like working on my own writing projects, but then also bringing in local artists and figuring out what it means to write with somebody as well as in relation to somebody. And this is again more geared towards not poetry necessarily. And when I reflect on like my poetry that I've written, it is all solitary. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that. And but one of the projects that I've done, it's based on Shakespeare. So Shakespeare wrote tons of sonnets, and so the project, basically I sit down with a local artist and we break down the sonnet, and then we actually, based on that conversation and then the original format and whatnot, we actually come up with our own interpretation of it based on the conversation and what comes to mind. And yeah, I forget what I was going. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, and in terms of Calgary as a community, how do you find it? What are the local publishing resources that you would like to talk about?
Oh, yeah, I was hoping to talk about this. My one and only so far full-length collection is from the local publisher called Frontenac House. And I'm fumbling around in my bag so I can do a little show and tell. My book is called Night Flying, and it was a number of poems inspired by the experience of being a military brat and constantly kind of uprooted and how that kind of affects your mind and your heart into adulthood with the relationships that you might have that are kind of like, like short term, let's say, because you just keep moving on. But Frontenac House is so awesome because they publish literary poetry of two kinds, at least. They do their narrative poetry, lyric from the I perspective, usually narrative as in storytelling. This is sort of the inheritance of the modernist. I think I said that earlier, and spoken word poetry. And they published poets like Andrea Thompson, and they just had their launch last week for their spring titles. And yeah, Wakefield Brewster. And so he had his first full-length collection through Frontenac House with Wake Word. And there are lots of independent Canadian poetry publishers, but not very many that I'm aware of that do publish both spoken word and poetry that's written primarily for the page. So I think Frontenac House is great, and you're lucky that they're in Calgary. So they want to publish some Calgarians as part of their mandate, I believe, and they're a great place to send your work to editor Michelin Baylor.
I didn't know about them. Thank you for that information.
I do not, I am not published. That is a part of my journey that I have yet to reach. So that is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, same here. I'm not published yet. So hearing that, like I said, like being part of this, you get to learn and connect with people who have and get the opportunity. For me, I've only done like YouTube videos where I put myself on those kind of platforms and created spoken word videos. Because it's really hard for poetry to get yourself out there. I'm currently right now, and I'm writing for a spoken word album. Because I'm such a like words, like you need to hear it. And so I'm not at the page part yet because I'm still working on that. But for me, I'm working on a spoken word album. So that people can hear it. And I've been asked so many times, where can I find your poetry? Like, I've been to your shows, but I want to be listening to it through my phone on Spotify. So I've heard the people, and I'm working on doing that. And we're always just finding new ways to put ourselves out there and have a platform so that people can find our work. So doing YouTube videos and creating spoken word videos are one way of doing it as well.
Yeah. That is like the new publishing.
Yeah.
It's what happens online. And sometimes that kind of publishing for a publisher of books, they'll say, oh, you can't have shared your work in any way, including digital form. But there's another movement, and there was an article that came out, I think, in Quill Enquirer, where they talked about loosening this up and saying, like, this is a way to get your work out and to gain an audience. Why are we stifling people from doing that when we want more and more people to get interested in poetry and then hopefully buy those books? So it all depends on the publisher. If you're looking at the book route, whether or not what you've put online on YouTube will be a detriment. But I think if it's the right publisher for you, then they'll be like, more power to you. You're building your platform as an artist.
I didn't actually know that. I didn't know that if you put something out there, some publisher will be like, oh, we don't want any of your work out there yet?
Not in the, like, it's not any of your work, but in the work that you submit to them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah, so it depends on the publisher. But I think it's great. And I watch a lot of button poetry on YouTube and other sources. Andrea Thompson does the Brickyard with Brick Books, where there's a lot of poetry videos there. So if you like poetry videos, check that out as well.
Wonderful. I'm just wondering from all of you, who inspires you as fellow writers, another writer or poet, even film or music, where do you go for inspiration?
I'll go. I see inspiration everywhere. First of all, like I love going to open mics and things like that. When I go to open mics and people are just, spitting their work, I'm just like, I need to go home and write. I need to go home and write. Like it's so inspirational to be amongst other writers. Like that's the easiest way to get inspired is just to go to an open mic. If you want to be inspired, go to an open mic, sit there and listen to other poets, and you'll feel like, oh man, I'm coming here next month with some new stuff. That's one thing. And I watch spoken word online, like button poetry, different places. That was my because when I started doing poetry here in Calgary, I didn't know a lot of poets. I knew Wakefield back in the day, and that was pretty much it for me. So my sister gave me like a CD of, I think it was Deaf Poetry Jam in the US. I think that's what it was called. And she gave me these CDs, and I just sat there and just took it all in. So some of my favorite poets are like Joshua Bennett. There was this Strivers Row. There's Joshua Bennett, Jasmine Mans, Alicia Harris, all on YouTube. And so I think they were my inspiration because you can't just sit here and watch just one poet because then you're going to sound like that one poet. You have to listen to different listen to Sarah Kay, because she's a little bit different from how I would speak. So I'd listen to so many different poets that I really enjoyed, and then just build from them. Like I like the style, and so even when I'm about to write, I'm thinking about how I want it to sound, and I'm like, oh, this poet does a really good job of having like really nice metaphors or something. So I'll go listen to it, and I'm like, this poet performs very well at how they use their hands. So I'll go listen to a different poet on how they perform it. So there's different poets that I get inspiration from, and I put it all together, and then there's me. So yeah, it's important to be inspired by other poets and other people.
No, you're good, drink. Okay, I'll take a turn. I had that early influence of beat poets, but then I glommed onto the female beats, right? Because they didn't get quite as much attention. And one that I just adore is Diane DePrima. And this is sort of a reissue of her revolutionary letters from City Lights Books in San Francisco. There's interviews with her where she's like, Jack Kerouac and Lawrence Ferlinghetti told me I had to stay and hang out with the poets. And I said, like, I gotta go home and take care of my kids. And they said, well, then you're not gonna be a poet. You're not gonna make it, right? And those guys are dead. And well, I think she recently passed away, unfortunately. But she lived much longer. She had a family life, and she still wrote her heart out and did wonderful work. So she kind of proved them wrong, and she's a wonderful feminist. And Revolutionary Letters is sort of a touchstone for me. Can I share a little bit?
First, go ahead.
Oh, I just lost it. Okay. I'm just kind of fumbling around. Revolutionary letter number 5. At some point, you may be called upon to keep going for several days without sleep. Some ups around to be clear-headed, avoid come down as much as possible. This one's all about drugs. Sorry, I picked the wrong one. Oh, here. Revolutionary letter number 4. Left to themselves, and we can relate to this a little bit from COVID. Left to themselves, people grow their hair. Left to themselves, they take off their shoes. Left to themselves, they make love, sleep easily, share blankets, dope, and children. They are not lazy or afraid. They plant seeds, they smile, they speak to one another. The word coming into its own, touch of love on the brain, the ear. We return with the sea, the tides. We return as often as leaves, as numerous as grass, gentle, insistent. We remember the way our babes toddle barefoot through the cities of the universe.
Lovely.
And everybody for sharing. Thanks. And then I was gonna show you with Susan Musgrave, but I'm not gonna read from every book that I brought. But she's Canadian. She's from the West Coast, lives on Haida Gwaii, and she was a Griffin Poetry Prize long-listed book for 2023. This is exculpatory release, and exculpatory evidence is that piece of evidence that can often get you off if you're the one that's the target in the trial. I don't have the right language to explain that, but so the lilies were given to her by her husband to get out of trouble. Exculpatory lilies, wonderful book.
Inspiration for me, as far as poetry is concerned, actually comes a lot from hip hop and rap. I just love hip hop and rap stands for rhythm and poetry, if you didn't know. Yeah. You know? And so that's where a lot of my inspiration comes from. And I like the old school stuff. I love like Kendrick and J. Cole. I don't know, I just think kind of fuses with music a lot, and I just think it's just storytelling, you know, and just how powerful it can be, these artists, and it's just how they craft it, I think, for me, and especially putting it into bars and music. Again, I just find it fascinating, and so poetry, especially, that's where I get a lot of my inspiration, and yeah.
I like that. I'm just going to jump quickly.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, my inspiration when I also started was Tupac back in the day. And so I had this path where I thought, oh, I can be a rapper or I can do poetry, but I have zero rhythm. Like, I don't know how to do stand. Like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't. There's rhythm in poetry, but not like how it is in music where you have to stay in the bars. You have to, when they say 8 bar or 16, I don't even know any of this stuff. So I can't stay in rhythm, but I felt like if I really actually tried and, learned about it, I probably could have, but I was just like, you know what, there's something about poetry where there's no restriction and it gets to just write freely and I don't have to stay in these bars, but that definitely was my influence growing up and just how they do the old school rap is just like, and the lyricists, some like the new ones who are lyricists, I'm just like, oh, that poetry is insane.
Not that necessarily they're bad, but I'd like to understand if you feel like you've made any mistakes in terms of your path in writing poetry.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I think, I guess I must say, I mean, I don't know if it sounds corny or not, but it's like that idea of, like, give yourself grace. You know what I mean? Like, just give yourself grace to do the thing and write the thing. And, like, one of my mantras that I have is like, people are greater than process, are greater than product. And I just trying to take that focus off of product. Like, we live in such a product-oriented, society, and so I just give yourself grace. And I guess that would be a mistake. Maybe I haven't given myself grace as much as I could have. But then it also happens for a reason, so that would be one thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I 100% agree with Daniel on that. Like, give yourself grace. I feel like over the years, I'm such a perfectionist when it comes to my work and having that final product that I beat myself up for not having something done. I beat myself up if I can't even write. And I always felt like, oh, poetry is gonna leave me one day. It's gonna leave me, and we're gonna break up. I have this relationship. We're gonna break up, and then I won't have any more words to say. And yeah, we just have this thing of like we need this finished product, and it's like if you truly love poetry, just write for the sake, and it might not be good, but just put it pen on paper and just leave it at that. I think the other mistake, mistake for me is just not opening up myself in community earlier on in my journey with poetry. I would go to events, and I say that it was like, it wasn't really like artistry events. It was like, oh, come do poetry at a fashion show. It's like, there's not any like artists there. So I would like leave right away. But then there was some events where I still would perform and I'd go because yeah, I am a little bit shy after I perform. I don't really want to talk to people and I have this, I'm like an introvert, so I'd run away. And I wish I had really opened up myself up sooner to community because man, that opens up doors, connections, and you know, I've been grateful enough that it has happened, but I think I should have been more intentional about finding community and being out there early on right away and meeting people. I think that's really important as like an emerging artist and someone who really wants to do that is you have to find community, you have to be part of community. It's nice to write in solitude, but you can't just stay there. You have to share it. So, you know, yeah, that's something I'll push for sure is putting out. It's hard. It feels like you always have to be on, and it's like, okay, I gotta go out there and meet people, but it's like you have to do it. And then after you've done it, it's like, okay, it wasn't that bad. And it's like, man, I met some really good people. And so yeah, I think it's important to do.
For me, I think of two things. One is that if you want to be the poet, the artist, you can't do all of the other things that relate to that you discovered that you could do. So I was so involved, like I had like volunteeritis for a number of years, volunteer, and I'm into music too. So Word Fest, the Folk Fest, like just everything. I was there all the time, and not writing as much or hardly at all. I think during that period, like little furtive things in my notebook, not developing that, not putting work out to try to get it published in small magazines, which is also something publishers like to see from us. And then years went by. It's like, wow, if I want to put my own book out, I really have to focus on that. Teaching is my exception because I love doing that. But I've even taken a break this year to try to focus on the second book. And another thing I would say, when I was younger, I had a bad habit of burning some bridges, unfortunately. And I sort of like done some soul searching. I was never good at having arguments. I guess my parents, when something was wrong at home, they'd like, go to your room and you'd stay there. And I never learned to have an argument. So I would do, in the face of adversity or a difference of opinion with others, I would either like cry and run away, or I would be kind of overly harsh, probably in defense of myself. And then I'd be like, yeah, well, you or this and like that. And that wasn't very collaborative or community oriented. So I've learned a lot over the years since doing foolish things like that. And we're all in this arts community, kind of like kids in a classroom, and we're all going to be there, and we all got to get along with each other and respect and value each other and the differences of opinion that we might have. So I'm still trying to rebuild some bridges that I burned when I was young and foolish and very idealistic. Like everybody should, want to do the thing that I feel is of the most benefit for other writers and stuff like that. So I really have a lot of regret in that sense, and I think I'm a better person for recognizing that and trying to move forward much more positively in the present day.
That's very sage advice. Thank you for sharing, all of you. Of course, we all make mistakes, and that's the best way to learn. So finally, I'll ask a little bit of a future-oriented question, and then soon we'll take a quick break and come back and have the Q&A. But I wondered about your goals for the future, your motivations for the future. You could even talk about our local arts ecosystem and how you feel about Calgary. But yeah, what are your endeavors going to be in the future?
I can go first. Yeah, like this residency has been very eye-opening for me, and so definitely have my eyes set on maybe more residencies and just opportunities. And but more broadly, I think I just want to continue to develop and workshop the many ideas that I have, and in whatever medium. I've done some film projects and acting and poetry, and yeah. So it's not super specific, but to continue workshopping stuff for sure.
And Daniel is part of a residency here, and it's called AIRI, AIRI.
Yeah, Artists in Residence Inn, because that's the name of the hotel. I believe they accept applications on a rolling basis, so for sure check it out. I'm having a great time, and our showcase is tomorrow evening in the lobby. So if you can make it out, it's free to attend. It will also be live streamed, and yeah. I mean, I could go on about it, but yeah.
Thank you. And Priscilla or Lorianne?
I'll go. Future-wise, I'd like to continue. I'm working on a spoken word album. I don't know when it'll be developed because this is a huge undertaking for me to even think about working with producers and all that. But I'm in the writing process, which is the beautiful part. Is I'm just gonna be writing a lot. Another big thing that's been really on my heart, and it's been in the last few years, is teaching poetry to young folks and aspiring poets, because I felt like I didn't have that when I was growing up here in Calgary. Someone here physically, like I'm learning on YouTube, but I needed guidance, and so it's been such a phenomenal thing to be teaching poetry through different workshops at the Arts Common or just anywhere, going into schools and stuff like that. And it's amazing because students will be like, oh, poetry, and they like sigh. And I'm like, oh, great. And I get excited because they think I'm gonna bring them like Shakespeare or something. And that's what they know, right? A lot of them, when I say I do spoken word poetry, never heard of it. When I say poetry, they're like, oh yeah, I know poetry. So I'm like, okay, I'll tell you what spoken word is. And performing that and then seeing their excitement, and then when we start the workshop, how they are so eager to share, it just tells me they have student kids nowadays, they don't have an outlet or don't know how to really express themselves. And so bringing that tool of poetry and use that, because when I started writing, I was like 14 in grade 8, 4 older siblings, you're going through a lot of emotions and stuff like that. And I found that when I get angry, I'd write. And so it's such a good tool to have to express yourself. And so I'm trying to bring that to the kids, that have an outlet, have somewhere to go and write. You may not share it, but at least you're writing what you feel out. And so some of these kids, they have so much to share and hear what is going on in their life, what they think of the world, and it's like, oof, it breaks your heart sometimes. So that's just been phenomenal to me teaching, and I want to really continue doing that and expand, and get into more schools if I could. That, and just exploring how I can continue to share my work on a broader scale and put myself out there, because for several years, like I didn't do that. But I had the grace of like good people around me that would share my name around to different organizations, to different events, and that's how I'd get to perform. But now being super intentional, to put myself out there, because it's not easy. Like you go to an event, it's like, who's gonna film for you? It's not like you have a personal photographer or videographer there shooting your shows and stuff like that, and to put your work out there. So you have to find different ways. You have to be creative. You have to come up with a thing and put up some things. So it's like, yeah, I've just been trying to be more intentional, like trying to put myself out there and stuff. So yeah, that's the future.
I want to get some more poetry out magazines. I'd like to have another book or two come out, and then I want to go back into teaching. And I'm going to continue to do the poet in class with poetry and voice, and hopefully do some classroom work. But I love teaching adults as well. I have it in mind to do something online, kind of my own accord, and then hopefully bring other poets into that and to do some online teaching of poetry craft. And I'd like to go and do some poetry festivals. Those are really fun. So depending on who your publisher is and how much they have to spend on like the marketing, they might write to festivals to say, hey, we have this poet that has this book, and you might get to like go to like, I don't know, Vancouver or Toronto or somewhere and present your work and spend time in community with the poets there. So that's fun stuff to do. And then I hope to be more help in the community. Maybe one day, I used to host an open mic for many years. I'd like to do that again, for all ages and all styles of poetry. You were talking about kids coming to you, talking to you about things. Sometimes they're quite difficult for them to deal with, and how poetry can help them to deal with those things, like self-therapy in a way, right? And in sharing their experiences through poetry. My friend's daughter started coming to a poetry open mic I was doing, and she had been cutting, and poetry helped her to change the way that she was expressing her feelings and put it on the page instead of putting it on her arm. So that kind of experience like really makes me believe in those community efforts, connecting with others and young poets.
That's wonderful. I appreciate all of your words today from all of you. I'm going to give it over to the audience after our break so that they can ask you questions, as well as our online viewers. We do have a bunch of people attending online as well. So during our 5-minute break, please feel free to help yourself to wine and hors d'oeuvres in the room and mingle. So we'll gather back in about 5-7 minutes. Thank you.
Kaylee.
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh, you should.
Dale, I'm Karen.
Yeah, kind of.
That's all right. You can use that. I do. I have a number of. I'm a Karen. You're a Karen?
Older now, but these are like.
Oh, yeah. I'm a poet, a publisher, and.
Perfect, this way I can.
But
So I'm in the Zoom.
They were like,
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
There we go. Oh, yeah, that.
I was doing it.
So I'm in the Zoom, I'll sit next to the
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, I had a monkey.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, this
87.
Someone's saying.
And
This
great moment I have, but Alicia, I trouble with reading.
No problem. And actually, I wanted to talk to you.
Hi, how are you?
Good,
you Good, good.
Well, you better do that now.
Is it charging? Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I can't let him.
Oh, no.
Zoom. Hi. Hello.
I should know you.
Okay.
Writer, publisher, recorder, and I've been away. I'm just coming back. And I really think you're. Oh, yes, I think. Probably. Yeah. She can tell you. But,
I know, sometimes I'm like,
well,
oh,
I helped with their first.
so do you often look at the poetry stuff?
Calgary People's Poetry Festival.
Okay.
Okay, and Ross Eldridge is the name of the publishing company, and we published the book. We published book, of all the poetry that was written by the people on the streets. Oh, it's a really good.
What's the name of your publishing company?
Ross Eldridge. The thing is, I've been out of the loop for 10 years.
A website as well, I never forgot it.
Yeah.
Like,
No, it didn't
Make
become.
us all up, but yeah, I started it.
So in like, oh, there's Ian. Oh, cool. I didn't see him there.
Because I know a lot of poetry
Ian
always
was published
so close
in
all the time. Yeah,
because
so
he
like,
was
oh
published
no,
in
so much
he
time.
was able to prove somebody
It's just-
that his poetry was recognized, and he got guests.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot
Yeah,
of things. There's,
Isn't it interesting?
oh, yeah, it's not just that.
Oh, no.
I'm that way too. In, probably 2005, maybe 2004.
But see, on the phone versus
What
on
I
the
do
computer
is
is
different.
different.
In 2006, I would.
And there was something. I'll just put your
Yeah.
sit awkwardly. It's
A
totally.
co-artistic director,
Yeah.
and I got.
Were you in it or no?
No, I just wanted to make just a picture.
And
Okay.
getting paid.
Oh, it's okay. Because I'll have to look at it on my computer.
After that,
It should be fine.
well, no, you
Yes.
can never watch it. Oh, you have to watch them climb the stairs, just like. this.
And-
But I just, you got a name.
Okay.
People start.
That's great.
I have no idea what people. Anyway, we're just surface. So, do you have, so I just.
We actually posted a talk on Wednesday.
Oh, yeah.
Online.
Yes.
Now there's trouble. I'm a tech nerd. Which is really
Yeah,
sad
God
because
bless.
at one point in time, Calgary spoke their podcast. Lori could probably help with this because I was podcasting a 1 hour poetry online once a week. And it was the flight at different events. Oh, God.
Oh, yeah.
The flywheel. The Red Mile Brigade.
Oh, yeah.
Come on, dude. Oh, single onions. Like, there were like, there were a lot of readings. Yeah, so I recorded them all.
How you feel?
Yeah, now we see, now we get into the sad story. 2012, I had a stroke.
I
And I
couldn't
lost
believe it.
I
He
knew
was so
people's
child
faces.
oriented. He wanted to
Their names
be
are
this
on
year.
So, developed aphasia.
And then there was another guy.
And then it's
Dreadlocks as well. Yeah.
And, you know, Will, back in the 80s, was really, it was a good time.
But I've been really seeing a lot of.
They were still static. They hadn't broken out into the street or any of that stuff. And this is my biggest claim. In 1989, I went to the Creative Reading series. There's a public library memorial. And I got to read, but after I read my poem, they told me that I had to leave because I was disturbing the people. I said, but if you think I'm bad, you look for what's coming. It's coming. I've seen it. And a bunch of the people that were in front row, they were, oh yeah, oh, we thought you were good. You don't know why. Maybe I was hogging the mic or something. But the synchronicity of the whole thing is this is going to be in 1978, Tom Wayman was doing a book tour for his first edited book. It was called A Government Job. Yeah. Oh, it's a very good book. He did a really good job. I really liked it. But that was the very first time I was exposed to poetry as the da-da-da, and Tom Wayman was his father. I audited his class 365, maybe 375 at the U of C. Yeah, and that was Tom Wayman. Tom, W-A-M-Y. He lives out in Spokane now in nice cabin. I don't. Anyway, the thing is that he was there when I was asked to leave the stage. He says he doesn't know whatever. I can, yeah, that's probably maybe not. He was there with Yvonne Trainer, who is the editor. The 79 poems for the Dandelion magazine in 1984. And that was the first time that I was really published and paid for my poems. Which is
Hey, what's going on, everybody? What's happening? My hat's sideways. I hope you're having a good day out there. Jill Armstrong, Marianne, Jackie. Who else is there? AR. Oh, shoot.
I'm sorry that I missed so much of the event.
Hope you're having a good time. We'll be back soon.
Why didn't you realize you were on? Someone was asking online about the Zoom. It was like, where's someone? I hope that they got the link. There was someone.
Yeah, there was an email. I don't know, maybe I forgot to share the link, but I shared it.
The RSVP would not print out the like 2 hours.
Candy, I got it. Candy. You
Oh no, this is something that can happen.
I'm sorry that I missed so much. Another event.
There's you see.
Oh, where did you go?
There.
A library. So the library is really interesting.
I'm going to read it.
Little series about little.
And I still write
Some more things.
so it's all right. I'll tell you.
So I was just like,
This generation. There's nobody from the
Oh, Calgary Underground Film Festival.
You give us a and they're lost.
Probably too candidly at times. I'm like, put up your hands, anybody else?
Oh, I'm Gail. What we're doing. Well, I'm seeing you in a comfort place. This is
This authentic date was really, you know, it's like I could never participate in that.
Not yet. No, I got you.
Right on the floor.
I made this myself. I took the lavender. And this is the lavender oil.
That's fantastic.
Here is my wood.
Oh,
Because this is getting better. No, I need to. Something's wrong.
I feel like.
Well, you know, when that was.
Hey everyone, sorry to interrupt. We'll get started in a few more minutes. Thank you.
yeah, yeah. I could use some phones. Yeah, I like. Okay, what happened? Actually, really? Oh, yeah. There's something. That fits. Yeah.
Right, so we have time now to have a Q&A with our guest speakers. This is a great time for you to ask these wonderful creatives about their practice, any advice that you would offer that you would like to have from them that they can offer to you. So with the online attendees, you can type your question into the chat, and Marianne is there to read them, or I can read. And of course, our guests in the room, please feel free to ask anything. Okay, I have a question over here from Karen.
A couple of you mentioned button poetry. Where would I find out more information about that? Can you describe it a little bit more?
The way I know button poetry is through YouTube, and it's a platform where poets perform, and they go all around. It's in the U.S. Most poets are American, and they just film different from different cities, different poetry events that happen, and so that is such a huge resource. They have so many videos of so many different poets on there, and that has always been a place where I, like, if I need inspiration, I'll go and watch a bunch of spoken word poetry on the YouTube page. And they also have on Instagram as well, but full videos on YouTube. Yeah.
If I may, it's not button poetry, but so I live in Lethbridge, and so there's a group there called Owl Poetry, and so I have recently connected with them, and they do all of they meet once a month, and it's all filmed, and it's all on YouTube, and it's called Owl Poetry.
At the Owl Acoustic Lounge, right?
Yes, at the Owl Acoustic Lounge, that's right.
Button Poetry also does some publishing too. So I got a beautiful volume of poetry signed by Andrea Kinston. That's all the Button put out here.
Also, I did have one more question specifically for you, Lorianne, and that was the red book, the reissue. Here, I made a note of it.
The Revolutionary Letters.
Revolutionary letters. Thank you.
Yeah, Diane Dupree, from City Lights books.
Great, thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead.
What are some ways that we can go about finding things?
So the question was, what are some ways we can go about finding paid gigs?
It's slightly easier in Poetry Month. I had some different people approach me. So my friend Cassie Wellberg, or she's become my friend, she was a friend of a friend, now she's my friend too. She's part of Richard Harrison's writing group. So some of you may know Richard Harrison, who taught for for many years at Mount Royal and won the Governor General's Award. Very cool guy. Anyways, so sort of met Cassie through them. She is involved with the Unitarian Church, in which, if you're not familiar with Calgary Unitarian Church, they do a lot of community events. You can be of any spirituality, denomination, and go there and just be in community with other people. Really cool people. And so believe what you want, but here we'll gather and do things together. So they did a poetry event. We had Sudi Ann Brown with us. And we had Skylar Kay was part of a Poetry Month event at Unitarian Church. Cassie shared her work as well. So kind of like when you're getting yourself out there a little bit, people might know that you're a poet and they can get in touch with you and ask you to be part of things. So that's great. You're not always going to have somebody reach out to you and ask. So then you start to approach community groups, get involved, let them know that you're around, that you're willing to do workshops, you're willing to speak on panels, things like this, and then you might be able to get involved more proactively and get paid gigs. The poet in the school events that I do are paid for by Poetry and Voice rather than by the schools. That's a paid gig. And then some events like the festival, the South Country Fair, yeah, the Lotus Land pays poets,
Canadian League Poets. Yeah.
League of
Registered
Canadian
with them,
Poets.
And then you'll get.
Canadian
Yeah.
League of Poets.
Sorry, we're hearing from Dale Harrington, who's just over there. And he knows quite a bit about this as well. And yeah, the League of Canadian Poets, once you've done some poetry publishing or you're recognized in a spoken word, you can become a member. And then if organizations apply to be able to bring in League poets to events, then the League actually pays for those poets to be involved. So that's what Sing Millennium does each year as part of their grant application. And they also get support from the League of Canadian Poets. The Writers Guild of Alberta also sometimes has poetry things and pays poets to be involved with them. Filling Station, they pay writers for submitting their poetry or like when they're going to publish. Yeah, that's awesome because that took a few years to come around. Where you're getting, grants to publish the magazine, but not money to pay the poets. So I think they had to push to get the money to pay the poets. Calgary Arts Development, Alberta Foundation for the Arts, there's grants available that can sort of not necessarily pay you so much as like take care of your subsistence while you write, or they might support you in traveling somewhere to share your work. Okay, sorry.
That's
Everything I could
an
think of.
impressive list.
Yeah, that was
Impressive list of resources in the community.
I just want to add on to it too. I don't know where you are in your performing. First, you'll perform and say it's for free, because exposure and stuff. After a while of doing exposure work, you need to demand payment. So if you get invited, I use a Carfax for my fees, and I tell them that this is my fee. Thank you for inviting me. Here is my fee. And see, or like, what is your budget? So if they ask you to perform, what is your budget for the event? And so you can gather around. And most of the time also use the support of other poets and spoken word, message them. I will message other people, hey, I need advice. What should I charge this and stuff? So, keep in contact with a bunch of poets and ask for advice on like, hey, I'm working with this organization. What should I do with? What should I charge? Or what do you think I should say? And so I've always done that too, where I'm like, I'm not sure what I should do. I'll reach out to somebody and ask for their advice on what I should charge or what I should say and stuff like that. But also, yeah, once you've done the exposure work, start demanding it. Start asking for it and be like, yeah, this is what I charge to do an event. And it's scary to do that because they'll move on to someone who will do it for free. But once you know your worth and stuff, you kind of have to stick. You have to stick to it because it's hard, you know. It's hard to just because you want to accept every word. Oh man, they're gonna pay me. But after a while, it's like, is some of it worth it? You know, I've done events where I've actually started. I will reject it because I'm like, is this even a poetry event? Are they gonna like? Do people know what poetry is? And so, you know, there's like stampede events. I'm like, stampede, like people are getting drunk. This is not a time for, you know, poetry. So know where you're going to. Some people are like, oh, I just want to throw poetry in there just for the sake of it. And it's not really a good environment to be performing. Say no to those. Just because they're paying doesn't mean you need to go to that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, you might not want a bunch of drunk cowboys
Yeah.
yelling at, woo, show us
Yeah,
your
I've been to
songs,"
shows where I
stuff.
didn't know and I didn't ask enough questions and I'm getting heckled at and it's like, that's not a poetry event. You need it quiet. You need to know people that are coming to that event know what they're expecting. They want to be listening to poetry. People that don't know what to expect from poetry are going to heckle you. They're going to be loud and talking and it's going to be hard to perform. And yeah, it's a disaster. So yeah, that's what I find.
And shall we take a question from online?
Sure, one of the questions is, as a performer specifically, if you're a member of the union like ACTRA or Equity, is it get into the way of getting gigs?
I don't know those organizations.
Yeah.
And someone's shaking their head and saying no.
That's like poetry literature and poetry reading and spoken word performance, but it's not like copyright.
Yeah.
Could I bring my mic over to
Yeah,
Dana so
please.
people online could
Yeah.
hear? Could you say that again? Sorry.
You can do your readings and your performance simply because they are not copywritten. And that's why ACTRA and the other organizations won't, well, what's the word I'm looking for, challenge you to what you're getting paid and what you're doing. It won't affect it. The only way it would affect you, even if you were doing it, you're getting paid by ununion attached companies or something, is if you were a paying member of ACTRA. And so I don't think most poets can afford ACTRA. And that's, so I think you're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was second that. I think they're mainly revolve around theatrical gigs. So I think it's kind of separate from poetry. If you're talking about acting, then yes, there's certain stuff that we could go into, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe if they want to clarify. But for poetry, I don't think so.
It doesn't really work the same as acting with the paid and the non-paid, the union and the non-union. So far, we're not unionized in the same way. But if a poet is going to appear in something that stipulates you have to be a member of ACTRA, well, I guess then you'd have to sign up for ACTRA if you want to be part of that opportunity. And be on film.
Sometimes if you're a member of a union, it's best to actually go to the union and talk to them about what they require or what the parameters are around that, I think maybe.
Yeah.
One of the questions online actually was about, especially when people have disabilities or have issues, even non-disabled, but have issues just organizing themselves, keeping on top of things. One of the questions was about, have you ever thought about hiring someone to help with that, managers, those sorts of outfits, whether or not that's something you've considered or know about, or are there even people out there that can do that sort of thing?
No, I can't afford a manager or anything like that. So, but I totally understand needing help. And so I always look for support within the community if it's something specific. Like, for example, if you're applying for a grant, let's say, and you needed help, they provide assistance if it's challenging for you and in that sort of way. So I think if it comes down to something specific or there's an event, it's always there's always like write a note on what your needs are, and stuff. I hope I'm answering that question. Is there's support in different areas, but for personally, for me to just hire like a manager and an assistant, I don't got that kind of money. Sorry, like I can't do it.
I'm having a brain fart about the name of a poet that I dearly love. I have my own challenges, I think, a little bit of the ADHD thing going on. I can't think of his name. I can see his face in my mind. He did the Olympic poem.
Shane Kochek.
Shane Koizan. I'm so sorry, Shane. And I'm sure he's not watching. But he did an event at the Bella Concert Hall at the Taylor Center. And I think they did it in cooperation with like Brown Paper Tickets or one of those groups. And I think he's got representation now from a group that normally represents musicians out of Vancouver. So if you get to a certain level, you can look for professional representation as a poet performer, where I think performance is the main thing that you do and you provide. Because he goes out and does big events all over the place. So he really needs that support. Somebody that can deal with the large venues and the promoters at those venues on his behalf, and like look into the contracts and make sure everything is valid. Yeah. And I think Leonard Cohen has professional management as well. Famously, when he went up on the mount to be a monk, his manager stole all his money. And then when he came down from the mountain, he had to do all this touring and publishing to make a nest egg again for his kids before he passed away. So be careful who you might choose to be your manager, because you might approach somebody and be like, "Do you manage poets?" And they're like, "Sure, I do. How much money can I get from Alan or Ian?" Anyway, that's kind of a pie in the sky.
One of the questions, well, actually, first of all, I want to say that there's a lot of discussion on the chat about the mantra that Daniel mentioned about, I believe it was something about people are more important than process and the product.
Yeah, people are greater than process, are greater than product, yeah.
Lots of yays about that.
Yeah, that was good. That was good.
We know what your password is.
There was also a question wanting to know what you guys are currently working on.
I'm involved in different projects. Mostly right now, I'm working with kids at Art Commons, the arts education program, and if they come in for either 5-day, 1-day program there, and that's going to finish off in June. With CADA, there's the dinner series where we're actually going into high schools and we're meeting. There's an elder at the table, and we're like just the topic is good relations, and we're just having discussions and opening that up and to students and working with students in that capacity to present something at the end of our 4 dinners. By myself, I'm working on a spoken word album. I haven't even touched it yet, but it's in my mind to start. I just have to. It's so hard to find time to work on your practice, and I've been trying to do that as I'm still teaching. But it's gonna finish soon, and so I'll get back to it. I feel like my summer months are a little bit slower, and so that's when I'll get back into the writing process of working on a spoken word album.
Right now, so I have my 2 independent projects that I'm working on. Again, with the support of Tell a Story Hive. So the one is called Thy Bard Shakes on It. And again, I just meet with local artists, and we break down sonnets and make our own. And so that's coming out slowly. And then the other project is called The Windy City's Finest. It's with my colleague Brent down in Lethbridge, and we interview local artists in Lethbridge and Medicine Hat. And it's kind of like a live stream series. And then I'm finishing up this residency and working on my own plays and just working on all the things. Yeah.
I've been working on a book of elegiac free verse. So this might be a tough sell. Books about people that have died, or poems about people that have died, in addition to needing to do some work with the People's Poetry Festival. I think that needs to happen again, hopefully next year. And also maybe, yeah, I think it's time to start another open mic. But I wonder if we might be sharing some work. This might be an okay time to do that. Then I can segue what I'm working on into sharing a poem. We recently lost a luminous light in our community, Selena Clary. She used to co-run the Refreshments series at Cafe Koi when Koi was still around, with Clover Collins. And they recently, her friend Melissa Nielsen and Jessica McCarroll put together an event for her and invited some of us to read poetry. So I wrote her a poem. I'm still working on it. If you could see this, it hasn't been scribbling on it. But I'll share what I have been working on right now. Path of Totality for Selena Clary. Your day arc brings you into the cafe, not a ray so much as a whole sunshine, vibrating enough energy to fuel bloom of worlds and words full of flowers, ecstatic and colorful as your sun mother, that I wonder if it's safe to give you caffeine. Stories spill from your mouth that a fellow poet can understand, like the poetic justice in being a poor artist and getting a free luxurious room at the Fairmont Palace for a pandemic week with spa access, just by sweet talking the front desk staff and probably reading them a poem or two. I could tell something was happening inside you, spectacular and catastrophic, these flares of blinding radiance, evidence of a solar storm. When you arced away again, your mind was a prism refracting intensities all over the inside of your skull super collider, humming with harmonic interference, beams hitting beams and altering them, distracting your thoughts from within. What good is intuition if symbols are noticed but not interpreted until after the fact? The apron you gave me at Cafe Clutch, I noticed in my drawer a week before you left us. Many poets see yet lack the gift of sight. Because you were the sun and because you suffered, the darkness that troubled you was not a bell jar like Sylvia's, but a moon shadow following you, continuous eclipse, its path of totality following you out to BC, hovering over the guest bedroom at your uncle's house, blocking your shine from warning the universe. If only we could have interrupted that shadow, paid good money to shift your envious mood, and while moving that floating mountain, why not bring back all that was lost or taken from you? Restore your rightful motherhood, the glowing sun's one precious human son. Put the money in your pockets owed to you and all other artists for choosing to share with others the creative gifts bestowed on you by the mother of the universe. Bring you back to all the people who love you. Return you to the light and the warmth you brought to others, but could no longer feel yourself. We remain in your orbit, dark and cold without you. Thank you. Yeah, so we're a number of us missing Selena right now, and it's hard to write about people that we lose because of the. Sorry, Kaylee, just fumbling around with things here. The subject matter is close to your heart, and sometimes it takes a little bit of distance to be able to see poetry objectively and craft objectively. So I know I'll keep working on that poem for Selena and hopefully polishing it up.
There's another question. What does it mean to be a poet? What is a poet?
I feel like I was just.
Someone who writes poetry. I feel like as soon as somebody's in a workshop and they're writing their first poem, I'm like, you're a poet. You don't have to have a special accolade to be considered a poet.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just like playing around with images and metaphors and everything. And yeah, I don't think you need anything like anything to qualify. I think it's a very accessible medium. I hope. Yeah,
I don't think anybody qualifies you by only yourself qualifies it. You call yourself a poet. As soon as you start writing, you're a poet, you're a writer. Yeah, don't let nobody tell you that you're not, or you have to do something, you have to go to school or something like that. You're a poet. You're a writer, you're a poet, you're a storyteller, you're a historian, like I said. And so, yeah.
The audience here?
Thank you all for your answers. It sounds to me, based on. Thank you. My name is Ian Kinney. I'm a poet in the community. And I appreciate all of your answers to what makes a poet. And it sounds to me like there's important process behind the poem. They need to want to write, they need to want to play with words, and they need to get themselves out there. And it sounds like it's a very accessible medium. It sounds like it's a very beautiful artistic practice. And when we bring it and we share it with the community, there's something magical that can happen. I love poetry, and I feel like everyone here is drawn to it in some way or other. The thing I'm wrestling with, and it's in response to this comment that folks are making around payment, is how do you find a price for a poem? At what point does our expressions and our play and our explorations of language become market commodities? And how do we reconcile the fact that, yes, we have to survive in capitalist society, and yes, we have to make the income to survive, and yes, our skills and our time are valuable. But if the poet and the poems are considered worthless, does that just mean that they're beyond the market or outside of the market? Like, how do you fit your poetic practice into market values?
Ooh, that's such a good question, and that's something I definitely feel like I wrestle with all the time. Because when you start becoming a professional poet and you're like getting paid for it, it's hard because now you feel like this is like a survival thing, and it loses what it was first a little bit. So you got to be really careful because it loses what it was in the original state where it's like, I'm just writing for the sake of writing. Now you get caught in this place where you're writing to get paid, and it feels dirty. It feels, it feels dirty. It feels like, oh, and I'm trying to find a balance where I'm not doing this thing to get paid, because then I'm gonna lose it completely. I have to find that balance, that writing is first authentically for me. I'm writing it for me. And so I actually try to do other things, to be honest. I'm a freelance marketer, and so I have other income coming in elsewhere, because if I solely depended on this, I found it in a place where I'm just working. I'm just writing and working to give this product to somebody, and it just felt like, oh man, like what happened to the beauty of just making art for the sake of beauty? Because now it's like a commodity, now it's a capitalist thing and so you never want to hate doing poetry. And I honestly feel like I don't have an answer to it, but you have to find a balance of not really doing this poetry to survive, and like you're a poet because you got to get paid and stuff. It's going to destroy what you first entered it in. When you first came in, it wasn't for money. It wasn't because you were going to get paid. You did it because you love it, and you have to remember that first. And if you lose that, you're going to lose what it was, and you're going to be sitting there like a factory worker, just writing for the sake of, this is an event. I need to write for an event. And I think that's where it's like, I like doing projects and maybe getting catered grants to pay for my living expenses while I spend time writing for my spoken word album, I think. And that's where the journey I'm going to do that, because this thing about writing for gigs and stuff, it becomes exhausting. And it's like, I haven't written for myself and enjoyed it in a while. And I don't know if I've answered your question a little bit, but yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
I think like one thought, one thought I have is just that like your time and energy has value. And so at some point, putting a specific price on it, I don't know, but your time and energy has value.
Yeah.
And so getting paid in some way, shape, or form is just necessary at a certain point. And so That would just be my insight.
Sorry, I'm gonna add on to what he just said, because I was talking about how it takes, when you're performing for a show, you take a lot of time and effort into it. And a lot of people don't see, they just think, oh, yeah, just come do one piece of poetry and we'll pay you $50 for it. And it's like, a what? What do you mean $50? Not, I'm not saying that like maybe someone it's acceptable for something, but like you put a lot of effort into it. You put a lot of effort into writing it, and you put a lot of effort into practicing. And people don't see the practice part of it. People think it's like I just go up there. I've been invited, and it's like, oh, can you come perform in 2 days at this big event with 1,500 people? I'm like, what? No, I can't, because I take my art seriously, and I need to practice. I need to give it my all. And anytime I even finish a show, I feel the exhaustion of how much I put into it. And it's like, that's what they're paying for. They're paying for the entire thing, how much work and hours you put into practice. That 7 times you're writing it out, they're paying for that. All of that goes into it, because it's not just the finished product, it's the behind the scene that they never got to see. They're paying for all that.
That's so true. I think that poets, like a lot of us are idealists, and but like, and so there's this connotation of like money's dirty, but money for honest people is subsistence, and it's being able to do the thing you love and to share it with other people and do less of the grunt work things that we maybe don't want to do for those of us that have other jobs on the side. The more I can be paid to do poetry, the less I have to be a security guard, for example. One of the ways that we didn't touch on for making a little bit of money as a writer is the public lending rights, the PLR through the Canada Council. And Ian, with your book, you've probably gotten a check or two from the PLR by now. Yeah, right. They give you a little bit of money every time somebody takes your book out of the library. And so that's so helpful. A lot of writers post on Facebook and say, ooh, it's PLR week when this comes around. And hopefully when you got that check, you felt proud of the work that you did and the fact that people are taking your book out. That's part of what that money means. Part of what the money means when you're getting paid for performances, that you're being able to share your work with an audience that they're helping bring together and continue on with our work. So I think we can do it for love and for money.
Yeah. That's what you said, calling it priceless.
Yeah, not worthless, but priceless. Yeah. I thought that's what you meant by that.
Well, I just wanted to say to Daniel, I guess I never really made the connection between music and poetry until today when you said because I'm from the generation where we used to have an album cover and pull it out and you can hardly wait to read the lyrics. And my music tastes aren't necessarily rap, but to look at some of them and go, I went to see Henry Rollins. He did a spoken word. And I'm telling you, I was on the edge of my seat. It was just, it changed kind of the way I view the world, to be honest. It took the words and just gave them much more meaning. Before I think I just looked at music one way. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
And unless there's other questions, I have a little anecdote on the people don't see the work that goes into it as an actor, like for sure rehearsals or behind closed doors, right? And so this is what interests me about trying to give audiences insight into the process. And anyway, the anecdote is this rule of 96%. And so it's this idea that, and it's from my high school mentor teacher. It's opening night, we're doing a Midsummer Night's Dream. Everybody huddles around, and she's like, you've done 96% of the work in rehearsals. The audience only gets to see 4% of the performances. You know what I mean? Like they don't see all the failures, all the line, misremember. Like they don't see all of that. They don't see all the practice that goes into it. And I just wanted to share 96%.
On that note, I would like to thank everyone for coming out today. online and in live in person to this great venue. Thank you, Daniel, for including EAR in this residency. Daniel actually chose EAR as a nonprofit partner in this event. And to Lorianne and Priscilla, thank you so much for your flexibility. We pull these things together usually very quickly before the event happens. Please, as a reminder, if you could consider becoming a member of EAR, we would greatly appreciate it. And it just helps us continue to produce these programs for you. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
And eat and drink.
I know, I was thinking about it, but I was like, it'd be so random, I'm like, yeah.
Thank you.
Good conversation. I learned a lot.
And then
You good? Just chill. I'm just gonna.
Marianne, I can't find that. I can't find where to do that.
So down in the bottom right corner, it says more.
Yeah.
Click it and it should say, go to captions. And then you'll have, should say show full transcript.
Oh, there it's captions. Okay. Show. Oh, full transcript. There we go. Okay, good.
And at the bottom of that, it just says save transcript.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for helping me find it.
No worries.
There, I just saved it.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
I know, I just see.
yeah.
What do you actually do?
Oh no.
What's wrong?
It just saved our little conversation we just had. That's it. It didn't save the rest of it.
Oh, you know what? That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. I don't know why.
I wonder if. Oh, you're the best.
Maybe it's the chat. It's what's in the chat. Let's see.
I'm just trying. I was trying to get the full transcript to save,
Yeah, the chat. Let's see.
but it's not saving all of it.
But it only saved our little tiny conversation. I can't find, and I've been looking for this recently too. I can't find where you can save the chat anymore.
Oh, it just automatically saves when it saves to the cloud. And I think the transcript will also save. So once you're done, you gotta leave your computer on because it will format the video. And then I can call you later about putting it in the drive, okay?
Okay, so I leave my computer on, Zoom gets shut down and I leave my computer on.
Yep.
And then what happens? And then you'll call me and
And
tell
then
me.
it'll save onto your computer and I'll call you and we'll talk about getting it onto the drive.
Oh God, I hope there's enough space on my computer. Do you know how
Oh,
big?
actually, Jill, you know what? I just realized you saved it to the cloud, right? You're recording to the cloud, right?
I'm not sure if it went to the cloud or not. It just said to start recording, so I did.
Okay, yeah, I think it's to the cloud. So I'll actually be able to get it right off of our Zoom account.
Actually, where it says recording, it shows a little cloud around the red dot, so that must mean that
perfect.
it's the cloud. Okay, I've never seen that before. Okay, awesome. All right.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a good
Thank
day,
you for-
everyone.
You too. Thanks for all the hard work you guys did putting this together. It was amazing.
Oh, thanks for helping out on the back end.
No worries. I was glad to
Okay.
do it.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, everybody who's online, we're gonna shut her down now. So thanks so much for being here. And yeah, stay tuned for more events coming up in the future. This is, like I said, this is our first hybrid event, so I don't know when we're gonna do another one like this with both online and in person. But we do have the online ones regularly, at least once or twice, sometimes even more per month. So yeah, follow Elephant Artist Relief Society or just Elephant Artist Relief on Facebook. Anyway, take care of yourselves and have a great weekend and hopefully see you again soon. Bye-bye.